What is going on, my friends? It is so great to be back with you guys for another video. My name is Ryne Williams, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about some dividend stocks that have just crazy high dividend yields. Each of the 5 companies we're going to be talking about today have a minimum yield of 5%, which if included in your portfolio could help you generate some passive income at a faster rate than some of those 2%ers or 3%ers. And just so you guys are aware, I do currently own each of the 5 stocks we're going to be covering in today's video. However, with that said, there is like 1 or 2 that I maybe wouldn't recommend for everyone, which is something that I'll discuss as we go on in the video, so stay tuned for that. And real quick, before we get rocking and rolling, if you guys love getting dividends and love learning about dividend stocks, and we sure have a lot in common, so go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Also, if you are new to my videos, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Please leave me a comment below and say what's up. All right, guys, thank you so much for doing that. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, guys, now the first dividend stock we're going to be talking about today happens to be one of my favorite and also happens to have a very high dividend yield, and that is Altria Group, ticker symbol MO. If you guys are unfamiliar with Altria Group, they were founded almost 200 years ago in 1822, and they manufacture and produce products like cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, so like chewing tobacco, as well as wine. Essentially a lot of stuff we probably shouldn't be ingesting too much of. If you haven't heard of Altria Group, you've most definitely heard of some of their products, even if you're not a user yourself. So some of the brands that comprise the Altria Group include Marlboro, Black & Mild, Copenhagen, and Skoal. I also mentioned that they have some wine companies, so a couple of those include 14 Hands and Chateau Ste. Michelle, which upon doing some research I found are very affordable, maybe like 10 to 15 bucks a bottle. Might have to pick up a bottle or 2 for the old collection. But anyway, guys, getting into the dividend, Altria Group currently has a super high dividend yield of 6.91%, almost up there at 7%, which is so hard to come by. But with that, Altria Group has a relatively high payout ratio of 75%. And I know I've mentioned this in other videos. I typically like to look for payout ratios in the range of 40 to 60%. I feel like that's not too low and it's also not too high. Moving on, Altria Group currently has a 5-year dividend growth rate of 9.08%, which actually I don't mind at all. I think that's a pretty solid place to be. Sometimes when you see them at 18, 19, 20%, although it's nice to see, those are kind of hard to maintain throughout the years. Additionally, you know, a 2, a 3, a 4% 5-year growth rate is a little bit low. So I think 8, 9, 10% is a pretty good sweet spot. And Altria Group's 5-year growth rate is right within that. Moving on, I want to look at this dividend growth on a different page. So if we pull up their dividend history right here, we can see that Altria Group has consistently been growing their dividends for the last 13 years, but they've been paying their dividend for the last 51 consecutive years, which is almost twice as long as I've been alive. Last little note on Altria Group. Altria is what is referred to as a sin stock. So as I mentioned, just because of the products that they manufacture and sell, they're kind of frowned upon by some people who don't want to support the types of habits that come along with purchasing these products, which is completely understandable. I do not blame anyone at all for thinking that way. It makes sense to me. But on the other hand, their stats are pretty undeniable. Almost a 7% dividend yield. A pretty nice dividend paying history the last 51 years. That seems pretty reliable, right? So despite them being a sin stock, they're still a pretty good company to invest in. All right, guys, now the next company I want to talk about today is Enterprise Products Partners, ticker symbol EPD. And in case you guys have not heard of EPD, it is a company that provides energy services for producers and consumers of natural gas liquids, petroleum, petrochemicals, as well as crude oil and refined products. So one of the big things they do is they transport a lot of these raw materials, the natural gas, the NGLs, the petroleum. They will transport it through their pipelines across the country. And currently they have over 50,000 miles of pipeline throughout the country that they send these materials through. And the energy sector can be kind of confusing, especially when it comes to companies like EPD. But to give you an idea of the end result of their products, in addition to being used for energy, a lot of their products end up being things like tires or sporting goods or diapers or even laundry detergents, antifreeze. There's a lot of different uses for the type of products that EPD produces and transports. One other note about EPD is it's not a typical company like a Coca-Cola or a Starbucks. EPD is what is referred to as an MLP, which stands for a Master Limited Partnership. And this is relevant because it changes the way that you're taxed on the income that you make from owning shares in the company. So with EPD being an MLP, instead of getting cash flow in the form of dividends, you get it in the form of what are called distributions, which is the same thing that you would get if you were the owner of a company. Now with that said, because you're a partner in the company by owning shares in it, instead of your brokerage adding it to your 1099 and sending that to you at the end of the year, EPD has its own form, a Schedule K-1, which is a separate form that you use to file your taxes, which is something that could deter some people from buying into it because they think it may get a little confusing. But I promise you guys, I do my own personal taxes, and I just went through it with EPD trying to input the K-1, and it was a piece of cake. Now getting to EPD's dividend, EPD has a very impressive current dividend yield of 7.08%, and their payout ratio is just a little bit higher, currently sitting at 81.72%. Now moving on to their 5-year growth rate, that's considerably low, less than 3%. Now with stocks like this, because the current dividend yield is so high, you might consider letting the low 5-year growth rate slide just a little bit because the current dividend yield is so high. And as a side note, guys, if you are investing in dividend stocks, it might be a good idea to have a balance of stocks that have a high current dividend yield and also stocks that have a little bit lower dividend yield and a higher dividend growth rate. And the last note on EPD's dividend, it looks like they have been consistently growing their dividend for the last 22 years straight. And that's also the same amount of time that they've been paying their dividend. All right, guys, now the third stock we're going to be talking about today probably will not come as a surprise to you guys. I'm a big fan of this stock. This is AT&T, ticker symbol T. Now, despite them being in a little bit of hot water with their shareholders lately, AT&T has a very impressive dividend and is in fact known for being a great dividend stock and having a high dividend yield. As you guys can see on the screen, AT&T currently has a dividend yield of 7.09%, with a not too shabby payout ratio of 65.89%. That's a little bit higher than we'd like to see, but we will take it. Now at this point, let me throw in a little bit of a side note. So the reason, for those of you who are not aware, that AT&T is in a little bit of hot water with their shareholders is because of the recent decision to try and merge Warner Media, which is one of their acquisitions, with Discovery, which is another media company that you guys have undoubtedly heard of. So in this merger, which isn't 100% likely to happen yet, it's still in the works, so it could not even happen, but if it did, it might be another year out from now. But one of the reasons that a lot of people are not too happy about this is because it's going to affect the dividend. It's gonna lower the dividend probably by quite a bit. Some have even said it'll lower the dividend by half. But in the meantime, guys, AT&T's dividend is very impressive with its high current dividend yield. Their growth rate's not very great, let's be honest, 1.83%. That could be a lot better, but their dividend growth history is pretty good. So they've been growing it for the last 23 consecutive years, which is good to see. They're almost a dividend aristocrat, but just based on what I said with the merger, they're probably not going to make it to that aristocrat status. They'll probably cut the dividend before they get there. All right, guys, now the next stock I want to talk about today is one of two REITs that I have in my portfolio, and that is WP Carey, ticker symbol WPC. So just a little bit of an overview on WP Carey. They are a commercial REIT, and they own warehouse buildings, retail buildings, different commercial spaces. And some of their current tenants include U-Haul, Marriott, and Extra Space Storage, which is a big self-storage company. And at this point in time, WP Carey currently owns 146 million square feet of property that they rent out to their tenants. And getting into their dividend, WP Carey has a current dividend yield of 5.45%, which is on the lower side of some of the ones we've seen today. But don't get me wrong, guys, 5.45% dividend yield is nothing to scoff at. That's still amazing. Moving on, WP Carey has a pretty high payout ratio of 91.85%. And I know that's outside of our range of 40 to 60%, but don't let that concern you guys. REITs legally have to pay out over 90% of their earnings, I believe, to shareholders in the form of dividends. In fact, a lot of investors don't even pay attention to the payout ratio of REITs. There are other variables they consider to know whether it's a good investment or not. Moving on, WP Carey has a very low 5-year growth rate of 1.67%. But if we go over to their dividend history page, we can see that despite that 1 year of growth, they have been paying their dividends at least for the last 23 consecutive years, which is still not too shabby. Hopefully they'll continue to grow it as the years go on. All right, guys, now the last stock I want to talk about today is Owl Rock Capital Corporation, ticker symbol ORCC. Now, this is one that I've been talking about in a handful of my recent videos. This is a stock that I fairly recently added to my portfolio, and it's a company in the financial sector, and they are what is referred to as a BDC, which stands for a business development company. And essentially what these guys do to bring in revenue is they will lend money out to small and medium-sized businesses to help them grow, and they'll also lend money out to distressed businesses to help them get back on their feet. And then they make money from the interest that they generate from offering those loans. And according to their website, 94% of the loans that ORCC offers are senior secured loans, which means that they will be first in line to be paid back in the event that the businesses go out of business. And getting into their dividend, ORCC has a current dividend yield of 8.37%, making it the highest that we've seen today. But with that, we see a really high payout ratio of 107%, or almost 107%. That is, pretty unideal if I do say so myself. Also, they have not been growing their dividend for very long. It's actually a relatively new company. I think they started in 2013 or 2014, so they haven't had much time to establish a ton of dividend growth history or a ton of dividend payment history yet. And with that said, guys, typically we like to invest in companies that have a proven track record. When it comes to dividend income, you want it to be reliable, you want it to be sustainable, and you want it to be something that you can count on. Which is why, I don't think this is a good stock to invest in for everyone. I think for myself, who has a lot of years left of investing, it's okay to dip my feet in the ORCC pond and just to see how it goes. Especially, guys, because it's such a cheap stock to buy. It's only like $14.82 per share. And as I mentioned, the dividend yield is really high as well at 8.37%. So, I'm able to take on a little bit more risk just because of the time that I have left to invest. And so, I wanted to try it out and, get 8% cash flow on my investment on this. That's pretty nice. It's kind of hard to say no to, right? But then again, I know that if I'm investing in it, I'm not going to make it a huge chunk of my portfolio. So just in my case, ORCC is only about 3.3% of my portfolio. So even if the stock went to zero, or even if the business went out of business, I don't have much skin in this game. And in the meantime, I'm collecting some good dividend income from this company. But with that said, guys, this is a little bit more of a risky dividend investment in my opinion. So, proceed with caution, tread lightly, do some research on this company before you decide to invest in it if you're looking for something with a high yield. All right, guys, now switching gears a little bit. I made a little sample portfolio with all of the stocks that we talked about today. Now, and my reason for this is I wanted to put these together and see what a little portfolio with all of these high-paying dividend stocks would look like, and also see how it would grow and perform over time. So as you guys can see here, we have every single stock we talked about: Altria Group, Owl Rock, EPD, WP Carey, and AT&T. And if we scroll over all the way to the right here, you guys will see that I accounted for about $2,000 invested into each of these 5 stocks, totaling $10,000 in the portfolio. So as you guys can see, just from investing $10,000 into this portfolio with these stocks, you would have an annual dividend income of $700, with the highest amount of dividend income coming from ORCC. And one really cool thing about having this much invested into ORCC is that each year, just from dividends being paid and reinvested, you'd be able to buy 11.33 more shares of ORCC, which amounts to almost 3 shares every single quarter when they pay you. Now, to be honest with you guys, I would not at all even think about having a portfolio just with these 5 stocks. I think that you need to switch it up a little bit. Maybe have some of these in here, or have all of them and then have a ton more stocks, but don't just build a portfolio with these 5 high yielders. This is just an example for demonstration. Now, the next thing I want to do, I want to switch over to this dividend calculator real quick, and let's see, how this would perform over time and how much dividend income you'd be bringing in as the years go on. So our starting investment is $10,000. If we go back to the spreadsheet, we can see that the dividend yield of this portfolio is about 7%, but we're going to be a little bit more conservative and say the annual dividend yield is 6%. And let's say in this portfolio you're investing $500 a month, so that comes out to $6,000 every single year. And then let's account for like a moderate 4% dividend increase. All of these are high yielders, so the 5-year growth rate of these dividends shouldn't be too high. And then let's account for a moderate 6% annual share price appreciation, and then switch this to quarterly. And then let's see how much money we'd end up with after 20 years. Okay, so scrolling down. So this has us starting out at $613 in year 1, which is a little bit lower than what we saw on the spreadsheet here. But as the years go on, guys, you can see it really starts to pick up around year 9 and 10. In that 10th year, you'll have hit that 5-figure mark. And then from there, guys, it doesn't take long for the compound interest to take effect. Just in 7 years, you will have quadrupled the amount of income you made in year 10. And after 20 years, you will have an annual dividend income of over $80,000 and a total portfolio balance of almost $720,000. So that is quite a bit of money, guys. Definitely enough to retire on, I would say, depending on where you live for sure and the lifestyle you want to have. But you could get pretty far with $80,000. All right, my friends, well, that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this one and got some good ideas for some other high yielders, which you may or may not be in the market for. As I mentioned throughout this video, you do not want to build a portfolio just with these kind of stocks. You don't want to just be chasing those high dividend yields. It's important to have a balance between ones that have a high current dividend yield, like the ones we talked about today, with some others that may be a little bit more reliable, a little bit more sturdy. Not that AT&T or not that Altria Group or even EPD don't have a good dividend history, but you got to balance it out with some really stable ones like a Coca-Cola or McDonald's or even Microsoft or Procter & Gamble. That's a really good, reliable one. Johnson & Johnson, stuff like that. But anyway, guys, that's all I got for you today. If you guys are still with me at the end of this video and have not done so already, please go give this video a like before you move on to the next one. I would really, really appreciate that from you guys. Also, if you're new to my channel, thank you so much for sticking around and joining me on my dividend investing journey. And if you are interested in seeing more content from me, please hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all future videos. And with that said, guys, I will now get out of your hair. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.